I'm not gonna go down for something I don't remember doing. I'm not going down for a murder that didn't even happen. I didn't know. I'm not.
I personally observed her grieving, crying, sobbing, breaking down many times.
You're just not as good as you were when you were with him. When you were with him, you were the best you could be when you were together.
It's the bottom of the ninth, and you've got 2 strikes, Dee. Okay?
I watched Cedric shoot him. I was in the room.
Behind everyday smiles and ordinary lives, dark secrets festered, turning partners into predators and love into lethal betrayal. From Nancy Brophy's twisted fiction to Vegas Bray's deadly obsession, these cases reveal how trust was shattered and lives were stolen in cold blood. Let's begin.
His eyes were green, and they were utterly heartbroken. Utterly heartbroken because he knew. He knew because he's seen who did this.
On a calm June morning in 2018, Daniel Brophy kissed his wife goodbye and headed to the Oregon Culinary Institute, just like any other day. But as the sun rose and his students filed in, something felt off. Minutes later, they discovered a chilling scene in the kitchen. Daniel was lying motionless on the floor. The peaceful culinary school had suddenly become a crime scene, and nobody could understand who would want to hurt such a kind man. At first, detectives had very few leads. Daniel's wife, Nancy Brophy, told them she had stayed home, walked the dogs, and taken a shower that morning. But 2 years later, investigators uncovered traffic camera footage that told a different story. The video showed Nancy driving to the school and leaving during the exact time Daniel was killed. When asked about it, she said she couldn't remember making the trip and must have gone out for coffee and forgotten because she was so stressed. The police started digging deeper and learned something else that raised red flags. Nancy had bought parts for a Glock pistol online, claiming it was for a novel she was writing about a woman planning a killing. As detectives pieced everything together, they realized Nancy wasn't just a writer with an active imagination. She had written an essay titled "How to Kill Your Husband." In court, prosecutors argued that Nancy killed Daniel to collect life insurance policies worth over $1 million and to get their house. Although she denied pulling the trigger, the evidence continued to stack up. The gun part she bought matched the bullets that ended Daniel's life. Her changing stories made the jury doubt every word she said. The prosecution believed money was the reason Daniel was killed. Nancy and Daniel were facing financial problems, and collecting insurance money seemed like the answer to her troubles. To investigators, it seemed she had turned her crime story into real life to solve her debts.
Do find our verdicts upon the counts submitted to us as follows. Count 1, murder in the second degree, guilty.
In May 2022, the jury found Nancy Brophy guilty of second-degree murder. However, she showed no remorse. A few weeks later, she was sentenced to life in prison. No chance of parole. Her story about writing fiction had turned into a real tragedy. Daniel Brophy's friends, family, and students were left heartbroken. They remembered him as a gentle man who loved teaching and sharing his passion for food. The thought that his wife ended his life for money left everyone in disbelief. This case shows how greed can destroy even the strongest bonds, and how sometimes truth is stranger and sadder than fiction. Our next case is a nightmare. 2 women betrayed a man who thought they were just friends.
Christopher Dickerson was viciously and violently murdered in an unnecessary and unjustifiable way.
This is the chilling story of Christopher Dickerson, a man who thought he was simply enjoying a harmless night out. But behind the friendly smiles of 2 strangers lurked something sinister. He could never have guessed that inviting them into his home would set the stage for an unthinkable betrayal. On the night of October 2nd, 2021, Christopher met 2 young women, Stacy Rodriguez and Hosanna Varela, at a bar in Greeley, Colorado. They seemed friendly and harmless. Later, the 3 went back to Christopher's home to continue the evening. But what was meant to be a casual gathering quickly turned into something much darker. Soon after, neighbors saw smoke rising from Christopher's house. Firefighters rushed in and put out the flames. Inside, they made a shocking discovery. Christopher had been stabbed to death before the fire was set. Detectives with the Greeley Police Department began collecting evidence and speaking to witnesses. The investigation revealed that Stacy Rodriguez had stabbed Christopher and, together with Varela, tried to cover it up by burning the house. After months of careful work, police gathered enough proof to arrest both women. During the trial, the jury heard about the terrifying details of the crime and how Christopher's life was taken without any reason. Though Stacy never shared a clear reason for the killing, prosecutors said she showed no remorse. In court, she laughed and joked, showing a chilling lack of respect for human life. Chief Deputy District Attorney Michael Paraglia described her behavior as diabolical and dangerous. After a 2-week trial, the Weld County jury convicted Stacy Rodriguez of first-degree murder, first-degree arson, tampering with a deceased human body, and 2 counts of burglary. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the chance of parole. However, instead of showing any remorse, she smirked, as if she felt no guilt for her actions. She also received extra prison time, 32 years for arson, and 12 years for tampering with the body. The burglary sentences were added on top. Altogether, she will spend the rest of her life behind bars. Her co-defendant, Hosanna Varela, pleaded guilty earlier to her role in the crime and was sentenced to 32 years in prison. During the sentencing, Christopher's father shared his pain with the court, saying, "Chris did not deserve to die that day. He deserved so much more in his life." The prosecutor thanked the detectives and the family for their strength and courage during the 3-year fight for justice. As the courtroom grew quiet, everyone hoped that this verdict would finally bring peace to Christopher's loved ones and some closure to the terrible void they suffered. Our next case is about a lottery winner whose fortune cost him everything.
So where do you want to go to?
It don't matter to me. I'm not a picky person.
California? You want a foreign country?
Really?
Cozumel?
Really?
In November 2006, Abraham Shakespeare was just a regular laborer making ends meet, until one quick stop at a gas station changed the course of his life. Abraham bought 2 lottery tickets on a road trip with a coworker. One of those tickets would change his life forever. Abraham's ticket won the Florida Lotto jackpot worth $30 million. He took a lump sum of $17 million. At first, he thought this was a blessing. But soon, he would learn that sudden wealth can bring out the worst in people. Abraham tried to live simply, but everyone wanted a piece of his fortune. Friends, strangers, even people he barely knew started asking for money. He often said he wished he had never won the lottery. Then came Doris D.D. Moore, a woman who claimed she just wanted to help. She started a business with Abraham called Abraham Shakespeare LLC. But instead of helping, she took control of his money. She bought herself expensive cars, went on vacations, and spent his money like it was her own. By April 2009, Abraham disappeared. His family and friends worried, but hoped he had just left town to escape all the pressure. They kept telling themselves he was relaxing somewhere far away. Months went by without any word from Abraham. Moore sent text messages from his phone to make it look like he was alive, but the texts didn't sound like him. Abraham could not read or write well, so his loved ones knew something was wrong. When detectives questioned Moore, she gave countless excuses. She and Abraham had moved to Texas, then Jamaica, then Puerto Rico. She even blamed substance dealers, a lawyer, and her teenage son. The investigation finally led detectives to a home Moore had bought. In the backyard, under 9 feet of dirt and a fresh concrete slab, they made a heartbreaking discovery. It was Abraham's body. He had been killed. After finding the body, detectives learned Moore had tried to pay people to move it, and even offered money to someone who would take the blame for the killing. She also tried to bribe Abraham's family to lie for her. Even when faced with all the evidence, Moore still told different stories about how Abraham died. In the end, she claimed she killed him in self-defense, but no one believed her. Moore's motive was simple. She wanted Abraham's money. She pretended to be his friend, but she was stealing from him all along. When he became an obstacle, she took his life to keep everything for herself. In December 2012, a jury convicted Doris D.D. Moore of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, she didn't regret anything and smiled. She also received an extra 25 years for using a gun during the crime. Abraham Shakespeare's story is a reminder that sudden riches can bring danger and heartbreak. His loved ones will always remember him as a kind man who just wanted a better life. In the end, all he wanted was peace, and while justice was served, nothing can bring him back. Our next case is pure horror. A wife who wept in front of an emergency just after she pulled the trigger.
He would text me pictures. He would text me when she was outside. I saw her outside of his house.
On a quiet day in 2012, Victor Saucedo, a hardworking father, was hoping for peace after ending a rocky relationship. But his plans for a fresh start were shattered when his ex-girlfriend, Vegas Bray, turned her obsession into something deadly. Victor had been trying to move on with his life. He was a young dad, recently out of the military, working and studying so he could give his son a good future. But after he and Vegas broke up, she simply could not let go. Friends said Vegas was a volatile ex-girlfriend who began stalking Victor. She would show up uninvited, damage his property, and harm him over and over again. Victor even moved to a new apartment, hoping she would finally stop. But the disturbing action only escalated. Victor reported vandalism several times. He told authorities about the eggs, paint, and jars thrown at his home. But since there was no physical harm and no clear evidence linking her to the damage, no one was arrested. On a tragic day in 2012, Vegas Bray entered Victor's Imperial Beach apartment carrying a .38 revolver. She shot him 9 times with hollow point bullets. Witnesses said she had to reload the gun to keep firing. When police arrived, Victor was already gone. Bray was taken in for questioning immediately. She appeared calm and confident, as if she didn't understand the gravity of what she had done. Investigators called this the ultimate act of obsession. Bray had spent months trying to force her way back into Victor's life, and when he refused, she decided to end it forever. During the trial, prosecutors revealed that Victor's young son was left without a father because Bray could not accept their breakup. Vegas Bray shared that she had faced many challenges growing up. She said she experienced mistreatment during childhood, was left by her mother, and struggled with mental health issues. Her defense team asked the judge to consider her difficult past with compassion, but the jury decided that these reasons did not excuse her actions. They were convinced her motive was simple. If she could not have Victor, no one else could. Bray was found guilty of first-degree murder and gun charges. She was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. As the verdict was read, she remained emotionless. The judge also ordered her to pay $5,000 in restitution. At the sentencing, Victor's family filled the courtroom. His brother said no sentence could bring Victor back to his son or to the family who loved him so much. Victor's son, just 9 years old at the time, was left traumatized by his father's death. He's grown up carrying the pain of losing a parent in such a cruel way. This case is a reminder that no one deserves to be harassed or threatened for ending a relationship. Our next case is pure evil. A young woman taken by a gun who couldn't move on.
Evidence suggests that you returned and shot Mr. Lawrence in the right shoulder with no exit wound. Stanley Lawrence succumbed to his wounds in the living room.
On February 19, 2020, police in Riverdale, Georgia arrived at Tamara Lawrence Way. She was crying and begging for help. Her husband, 58-year-old Stanley Lawrence, had been shot while sitting on the living room couch. When officers arrived at the couple's home on Oak Valley Drive, they found Tamara on her knees, sobbing. But even as she pleaded for an ambulance, she refused to explain what had happened. When investigators asked her who pulled the trigger, she simply said, "I can't say." Officers quickly secured the scene. They discovered a handgun placed on the living room table, close to where Stanley had been shot. Despite Tamara's emotional state, detectives needed answers. They pressed her again to tell the truth, but she asked for a lawyer before saying anything more. The following day in court, Magistrate Judge Salvia Smith shared more details about the crime. The evidence showed that Tamara returned to the living room and fired a single shot into her husband's right shoulder. The bullet never exited his body. Stanley Lawrence died where he sat, in the home he shared with the woman he had married only a year earlier. News of Officer Lawrence's death sent shockwaves through Atlanta's law enforcement community. He wasn't just a police officer. He was a mentor, a friend, and a role model to countless kids. Deputy Chief Terrell Griffin described him as a giant of a man, so gentle and so heartwarming. To this day, the motive behind the killing remains unclear. Tamara Lawrence never explained why she fired that shot, and investigators have not revealed what might have led to this deadly act in such a short marriage. She was held in custody without bond on charges of murder and aggravated assault. Eventually, her trial took place in Clayton County courtroom, where prosecutors attempted to uncover the truth behind the tragedy. After just 34 minutes of jury deliberation, Tamara Lawrence was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole for taking the life of her husband. Even as the verdict was read, she remained stone-faced. Officer Stanley Lawrence's colleagues and friends are still grappling with the loss. Many remember the way he lit up every room he entered and how he inspired children through the Police Athletic League. Even though he stood 6 feet 8 inches tall, those who knew him say his kindness was even bigger. Our next case seemed like a picture-perfect life, a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a deadly secret. Monica Cementilli wanted it all, no matter the cost.
She just kept saying that he's gone, that I'm not a wife anymore. Just the weeping, the not being able to breathe. She was beyond devastated, beyond devastated.
In 2017, a calm afternoon in Woodland Hills turned into a nightmare. Fabio Cementilli, a well-known celebrity hairstylist and a loving father, was found stabbed to death in his backyard. The news stunned the beauty industry and everyone who knew him. He was kind, talented, and deeply loved by his family. But behind the peaceful image of his home, something heartbreaking was unfolding. At first, it looked like a home invasion gone wrong. Police believed it was a random act of conflict. However, the truth was far more personal and painful. As detectives searched for answers, they began to uncover secrets that would leave everyone speechless. Investigators eventually turned their focus to someone else, Fabio's wife, Monica. They learned she was having an affair with Robert Baker, a man with a dark past. Slowly, the pieces came together. Monica and Baker had been using encrypted apps to keep their conversations hidden. Evidence showed Monica may have left doors unlocked to let the killers in. A man involved in the killing, Chris Austin, admitted to helping Baker in the attack. He later testified that Monica was part of the plan all along. The deeper the investigation went, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a crime. It was a betrayal. The courtroom was filled with quiet tears. Fabio's sisters, Morella and Lori, called it a day of healing. Justice was served today, Morella said. Our spirits are lifted. My brother can finally rest. We are overjoyed she will spend the rest of her life in jail, Lori added. Prosecutors said Monica wanted to inherit Fabio's estate and hoped to build a new life with Baker. Instead, she destroyed everything: her family, her future, and the life of a man who trusted her. Baker pleaded no contest and was sentenced to life in prison. Monica went to trial. She cried as the verdict was read.
The indictment. We further find the murder to be of the first degree and carried out by the defendant, Monica Cementilli, for financial gain within the meaning of Penal Code Section 190.2A1 to be true. We further find the allegation that the defendant, Monica Cementilli,
guilty on all counts, including conspiracy and killing for financial gain. She now faces life in prison with no chance of parole. It was a painful journey for everyone. A beloved father lost, a family forever changed, and a wife who should have protected, but instead chose to destroy. Our next case involves a woman who conspired with her friend to murder her husband, then carried on as if nothing ever happened.
What the verdict says, I am innocent of these crimes. I never asked anyone to harm or murder my husband.
On a quiet February night in 2019, a hero returned home after a long shift. Evansville firefighter Robert Dewar had served his community for nearly 3 decades. But just as he pulled into his driveway, he was ambushed, shot multiple times, and left to die. What began as the tragic loss of a local hero soon unraveled into something darker. His wife, Elizabeth Fox Dewar, was behind it. Elizabeth had been married to Robert for years. To the outside world, they seemed like a normal couple. But behind closed doors, she was hiding a deadly secret. She had started a relationship with a man named Larry Richmond Sr., a convicted killer recently released from prison. And together, they plotted the unthinkable, Robert's death. After Robert was gunned down, the Evansville Police Department launched an intensive investigation. Though the weapon, a powerful Taurus Judge revolver, was never recovered, detectives pieced together a trail of digital footprints, witness statements, and motive. Suspicion quickly turned to Elizabeth and her new lover, Richmond. It became clear that Elizabeth didn't just have a broken marriage, she had a plan. The trial was intense. Prosecutors revealed that Elizabeth didn't just know about the killing, she helped plan it. She wanted Robert out of the picture and used Richmond to make it happen. Robert, who wore his badge with pride, had no idea the woman he trusted most was setting him up to be killed. Some say her motive for killing was money. Others say she wanted to start a new life with her lover. But no matter the reason, the cost was the same. One good man dead and a community devastated. In May 2024, after years of pain and waiting, justice was served. As the verdict was read and Elizabeth was found guilty of murder and conspiracy to commit killing, she started sobbing and said, "I'm in shock, devastated and lost." A judge sentenced her to 90 years in prison, 60 years for murder and 30 years for conspiracy. Since the charges were treated as separate acts, she will serve the sentences one after the other. The courtroom was packed when the sentence was read. Some whispered yes in relief. Robert's fellow firefighters, friends, and family had waited 5 years for this day. His daughter, Lindsay, tearfully remembered the moment she learned her father was gone. His best friend spoke about losing a partner and a brother. The pain was still raw, but the sentence brought some closure. Elizabeth showed little emotion, even as the sentence was read. She plans to appeal, but for Robert's loved ones, the message was clear. Justice may take time, but it never forgets. Our next case reveals a chilling mother who placed the blame for her ghastly crimes entirely on her son.
Yeah. Right. That's good. Just watch your back.
It began with smoke rising from a quiet property in Cherokee County, Georgia. The fire wasn't from a bonfire or a grill. It came from something far more chilling. In 2018, a chilling discovery was made on the quiet property of Gary Wayne Ferris, a respected lawyer and devoted father. His remains were found beneath a burned pile of debris. Gary had lived there with his wife, Melody, but soon after the grim find, Melody was arrested. As detectives dug deeper into the case, they uncovered a trail of troubling signs, lies, inconsistencies in Melody's story, and a history of tension within the family. At first, the scene was a mystery. No one could believe it. A well-known family, shattered without warning. Detectives approached the case with precision, examining every detail. As the investigation unfolded, suspicion gradually turned toward Melody. They interviewed the couple's 3 children, Emily, Chris, and Scott. They searched the property, inspected the burn pile, and analyzed Melody's statements against the physical evidence. She was arrested and charged not only with Gary's killing, but also with attempting to cover it up. Despite the charges, Melody maintained her innocence. At sentencing, Melody finally broke her silence. She told the courtroom she had stayed quiet for over 6 years, following legal advice and trying to protect her family. But now, she said she couldn't hold it in any longer. Looking directly at her son, she admitted she could no longer protect him. She recalled seeing him near the fire that day. At first, he claimed he was just making sure it didn't spread, but later his story changed. Still, none of these claims changed the outcome. Nothing Melody said in court was enough to prove someone else was responsible. So what tore this family apart was a combination of long-standing issues in the marriage. Prosecutors highlighted a past affair and more recent arguments over money. It was a slow unraveling that ultimately ended in tragedy. And while the court reached a verdict, what truly happened in those final moments remains unclear. In court, she claimed her son, Scott, was behind it all. She described him as angry and unpredictable, and said he even failed a lie detector test. She said he framed her, but the court saw things differently. Tears came into Melody's eyes when the verdict was read, and she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. She also received 2 additional 5-year sentences, one for hiding Gary's death, the other for making false statements.
We, the jury, as to count 4, find the defendant guilty.
The sentences would run concurrently, but the judge made it clear parole was unlikely. A once intact family was left in pieces. Her husband was gone. A mother stood accused by her children. 3 siblings were left with wounds that time alone can't heal. And the long, painful silence of a family that may never find peace. Our next case is even colder. A woman driven by revenge, leaving behind a trail of her own family's lives.
She came into my life telling me that she was there. She wasn't there to pull my family apart. She was there to give me the opportunity to clean up my life.
In the quiet stillness of a small Vermont town, no one could have predicted the storm that was about to erupt. Not in the sky, but in the mind of one woman. Beneath the surface of Jody Herring's seemingly ordinary life, rage and despair had been building, slowly boiling over. Then, in a single day, that inner chaos spilled outward in the form of a merciless killing spree that would leave 4 people dead and an entire community reeling. Jody Herring, a mother who had recently lost custody of her 9-year-old daughter, had reached her breaking point. On August 7, 2015, just hours before a string of brutal killings, she left a voicemail that would later become a haunting piece of evidence. "You might want to stop. Calling DCF or I'm going to come there and shoot your brains out." She screamed into the answering machine of her relatives. Those words, once dismissed as a desperate outburst, turned into a terrifying prophecy. Herring's rage first turned inward, toward her blood. On the morning of August 7th, she went to the home of her relatives in Berlin, Vermont. Inside the house were Rhonda Herring, her cousin's mother, Regina Herring, her aunt, Julie Falzarano, her grandmother. What unfolded was a silent massacre. The 3 women were shot dead. There was no cry for help, no time to run. Police believe Herring executed the killings with methodical precision, cold, calculated, and personal. The bodies wouldn't be discovered until the next day, when Tiffany Herring Flint, daughter of one of the victims, came looking for her mother. Social worker Lara Sobel was gunned down. Later that same day, Herring took her fury to the state itself. Around 4:45 p.m., as Lara Sobel, a social worker with DCF, walked out of her office in downtown Barrie, Herring was waiting. Armed with a hunting rifle, she shot Sobel twice in the torso in front of horrified witnesses. Sobel collapsed near the building steps, and bystanders quickly restrained Herring until police arrived. Witness Carlin Sizemore testified that Herring was shouting, waving the rifle wildly, and yelling, "They didn't listen to me. It was my 9-year-old daughter. They got what they deserved." Jody Herring believed that the people closest to her had betrayed her. She was convinced that her relatives had been speaking to the Vermont Department for Children and Families, influencing the agency's decision to take away her daughter. For Herring, this wasn't just about custody. It was personal. It was war. In her eyes, those who helped DCF had destroyed her family, and now she would destroy theirs. During the sentencing hearing, defense attorney David Slay painted a dark picture of Herring's past. Growing up in a household of 16 children, Herring and her relatives were allegedly victims of ongoing physical, emotional, and psychological mistreatment. The trauma left deep psychological scars. Slay revealed that Herring's mental health had been rapidly deteriorating. She had recently been released early from a 90-day involuntary commitment at a psychiatric facility. If the system hadn't failed her again, he argued, she would have still been hospitalized the day the deaths occurred.
Count 1, which is the murder of Julie Falzarano, sentence will be 20 years to life to serve.
In July, Jody Herring pleaded guilty to first-degree murder for the death of Lara Sobel and 3 counts of second-degree murder for the deaths of her relatives.
I've been a mean person in my whole life, and Mr. Sobel is right. The loss of a child is so hard to endure. Felicia's right here. Desiree's up in the Chittenden County Correctional Center with me.
As the verdict was read, Jody broke down in court. The plea agreement recommends a sentence of 20 years to life for the second-degree murder charges. The decision of whether she will spend the rest of her life behind bars without the possibility of parole for Sobel's murder now rests with Superior Court Judge John Pacht. As the hearing continues, Vermont is left reeling from the horrific events. A child lost, 4 lives taken, and a justice system once again forced to reckon with the devastating cost of untreated trauma and unaddressed mental illness. Our next case is pure horror, where a $35 manicure led to a life being taken without a second thought.
I don't know the laws, and I don't care what it'll take. I will get you a lawyer. We will fix this. Just come home, call me, call Grandma. We could do this. We could do this together.
It was an ordinary day in Las Vegas when something unthinkable happened outside a small nail salon. What began as a routine manicure ended in a tragedy that would leave a family shattered and a city in shock. This is the case of Crystal Whipple and the tragic death of a hardworking mother, New Annie Knock Nguyen. Annie Nguyen was a loving mother, a dedicated worker, and a woman who gave everything to support her daughters. She managed Crystal Nails and Spa and often worked 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. On the day of the incident in December 2018, she was just doing her job, offering someone a $35 manicure. That customer was 23-year-old Crystal Whipple. After finishing her appointment, Whipple tried to pay using a credit card, but it was declined. She told Annie she would get cash from her car, but when she stepped outside, she jumped into a black Camaro and tried to flee. Annie and her boyfriend followed her out, hoping to stop her. As Whipple tried to escape, she hit Annie with the stolen car and dragged her about 50 feet across the parking lot. Annie was badly injured and died from her wounds. The police immediately began searching for Whipple, but she had already disappeared. Whipple used a fake ID and fled across state lines, from Las Vegas to Boulder City, then to Los Angeles, and finally to Arizona. She was on the run. She even planned to travel to North Carolina, but in January 2019, she was finally caught and arrested. At first, Whipple faced charges including robbery, stolen vehicle use, and burglary. But later, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. In court, she chose not to say anything during sentencing, but her silence couldn't undo the pain she'd caused. Her motive was simple: to avoid paying for a $35 manicure. That choice, to steal a service and run, led to a deadly outcome. A decision made in seconds took away a mother, a provider, and a beloved member of her community. District Judge Tiara Jones sentenced Whipple to 10 to 25 years in prison. As the judge announced these words, she simply gave a grief-stricken expression. The judge called the case absolutely horrifying. A woman lost her life simply trying to do her job. During the hearing, Annie's youngest daughter, Leigh, shared heartfelt words through a video feed. She said her mom was the epitome of selflessness. A refugee who raised her children alone, Annie always put her family first. Leigh added, "My achievements are her achievements. We all miss her very much." Annie's life was one of hard work and sacrifice. In the end, her dedication to her job led to a tragic and unfair end. This case reminds us that behind every face is a story, a family, and a future. And sometimes, the smallest acts of dishonesty can lead to the biggest disasters. The actions of these women shattered the illusion that danger always looks obvious. Their reactions in court were more than just emotional. They were powerful reminders that even the most unexpected faces can hide deep secrets. In the end, their life sentences weren't just about punishment. They served as a wake-up call that appearances can be deceiving, and justice always finds its way. Our next case took over 20 years to bring her to trial, but when Lori Shaver finally faced the courtroom, the details were more disturbing than anyone imagined.
Last time Michael Shaver is ever seen by anyone other than the woman that murdered him, Lori Shaver.
Michael and Lori Shaver seemed like an ordinary couple living in Claremont, Florida. Michael worked as a monorail technician at Disney World, and they had a family together. However, behind closed doors, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. In 2015, Michael suddenly disappeared. His family and friends were confused. He would never abandon his loved ones. Lori, however, had an explanation. She claimed Michael had left on his own and never returned. She even sent messages from his Facebook account, making it seem like he was still alive. For 3 years, Lori kept up the act, but in 2018, everything changed when a friend of Michael's started asking questions that Lori could no longer avoid. Michael's close friend grew suspicious. It had been too long since anyone had seen or heard from him. He contacted the Lake County Sheriff's Office and asked them to check on Michael. When deputies arrived at the Shaver home, Lori repeated her story. Michael had left in 2015 and she didn't know where he was. But something felt off. The officers noticed the fire pit in the backyard looked unusual. The concrete underneath had sunk, forming a shape that strangely resembled a body. Authorities knew they had to investigate further. They obtained a warrant and returned with cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar. As they dug beneath the fire pit, their worst fears were confirmed. Michael's body was buried 3 feet underground, wrapped in a fitted sheet, covered with a tarp, and secured with straps. He had been shot in the back of the head. The medical examiner determined that he had been killed several months to several years before. Lori had been living in the same house, raising her children, hosting family gatherings, all while her husband's body was hidden beneath their feet. After Michael's death, Lori went to extreme lengths to cover up her crime. She used his Facebook Messenger account to communicate with his family and friends, making them believe he was still alive. Meanwhile, she moved on with her life. She began dating another man and eventually married him in 2016, just a year after Michael's disappearance. She had 2 more children and carried on as if nothing had happened. However, he was not involved in the killing of Michael. Even her neighbors believe she was intoxicated. Lori's exact motive remains unclear, but prosecutors believe it was a combination of household conflict and a desire to move on with a new life. Instead of facing a divorce or separation, she took matters into her own hands, eliminating Michael and attempting to erase him from existence. For years, she deceived those around her, but the discovery of the hidden body sealed her fate. In 2023, Lori stood trial for Michael's killing. She had a shocking defense. She claimed that her daughter had accidentally fired the gun while trying to protect her. During the trial, her daughter, now 15, testified in tears that she had indeed fired a gun at her father while he was attacking her mother. But prosecutors argued that this was just another of Lori's manipulations, a last-ditch effort to escape justice. The jury didn't believe her. After a week-long trial in 2020, they found her guilty of second-degree murder with a firearm and sentenced her to life imprisonment. Lori had fooled everyone for years. She pretended Michael had simply walked away while she built a new life. But in the end, it was her backyard, her secret, that led to her downfall. No amount of deception could bury the truth forever, but torment was left for Michael's family. Our next case shows how the person you trust the most can betray you most chillingly through antifreeze poisoning.
Individual who is here to run. She understands what the charges are. She voluntarily walked herself in to face these charges and to defend herself.
On July 30th, 2006, 31-year-old Matthew Podolak was rushed to Panama General Hospital, complaining of severe lower back pain. Less than a day later, he was dead. When forensic analysis took place, it was clear that the cause of his death was chronic antifreeze poisoning. At first, the case remained a mystery, but years later, shocking new evidence pointed to one suspect, his fiancée, Holly McFeature. Matthew Podolak had no known health issues, so his sudden death left his loved ones confused and heartbroken. His autopsy revealed high levels of ethylene glycol, the main ingredient in antifreeze, indicating he had been poisoned over time. At first, authorities weren't sure whether it was suicide, an accident, or something far more sinister. His fiancée, Holly McFeature, seemed devastated, but was she hiding a dark secret? For years, Matthew's death remained unsolved. It wasn't until 2011, 5 years later, that investigators received a crucial tip. The new evidence led them to re-examine the case, and they started looking closely at Holly. Detectives discovered that Matthew's favorite drink was raspberry iced tea. Prosecutors believed Holly had been slipping antifreeze into his tea for weeks, maybe even months, slowly poisoning him to death. In 2012, Holly McFeature was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and contaminating a substance for human consumption.
No possible way to know that someone was poisoning him.
During the trial, prosecutors demonstrated how antifreeze, which is clear and odorless, could easily dissolve in iced tea without being noticed. Matthew had no idea he was being poisoned. The prosecution argued he fell in love with the wrong woman. She was toxic to him. However, Holly's defense team tried to claim that Matthew had taken the antifreeze himself in one lethal dose, suggesting he had ended his own life. On the other hand, the autopsy told a different story. Matthew's body showed signs of long-term poisoning, proving he had been unknowingly ingesting antifreeze over time. Investigators soon uncovered a chilling motive. After Matthew's death, Holly quickly collected his life insurance payout and his 401k. Shockingly, she didn't even use the money to pay for his funeral. Prosecutors believed she saw Matthew's death as a financial opportunity, one that would free her from money troubles. Instead of breaking up with him, she took a much darker path.
We find the defendant, Holly McFeature, guilty of aggravated murder.
After hearing all the evidence, the jury deliberated on Holly McFeature's fate. The answer came quickly. Holly was found guilty of murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with the eligibility of parole after 30 years for slowly poisoning the father of her children, the man she once promised to love forever. As the verdict is read, McFeature begins to cry, realizing that she must finally pay for her crimes. Matthew Podolak had no idea that the person he trusted most was the one plotting his death. He drank his favorite iced tea every day, never realizing that each sip was bringing him closer to his final moments. This case is a terrifying reminder that danger can sometimes come from those closest to us. Holly McFeature didn't just betray Matthew. She took his life in one of the most cold-blooded ways imaginable. Justice was served, but for Matthew's family, no sentence could ever bring him back. Our next case is one of pure tyranny, where a simple eye drop became a deadly weapon, taking a man's life.
I did impulsively put the Visine in Stephen's drink, and I did it with the intent to make him sick and uncomfortable.
In July 2018, Stephen Delval Clayton, a wealthy and well-respected man from Clover, South Carolina, suddenly fell ill. His health rapidly declined over 3 days, and then, without warning, he was gone. His wife, Lana Sue Clayton, claimed she had no idea what had happened. When an autopsy was performed, investigators found something shocking in his system: lethal levels of tetrahydrozoline, the active ingredient found in eye drops. The discovery turned a simple case of unexpected death into a horrifying murder investigation. At first, there were no signs of foul play. Stephen's death was presumed to be natural. But when doctors analyzed his toxicology report, they found something unusual. He had been poisoned. The amount of tetrahydrozoline in his body was far beyond what could be considered accidental. Suspicion quickly turned to his wife, Lana Clayton. Investigators learned that she had been administering the eye drop poison for 3 days before he died. When confronted, Lana admitted to giving her husband the toxic substance, but she insisted she never meant to kill him. According to her, she only wanted to make him sick. This confession might have made her seem remorseful, but investigators weren't convinced. After all, this wasn't the first time Stephen had been harmed under suspicious circumstances. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered troubling details about Lana's past. In 2016, 2 years before poisoning her husband, she had shot Stephen in the back of the head with a crossbow. At the time, she claimed it was an accident. She later changed her story, saying they had argued, and she fired the crossbow while running away. Despite a troubling past, Stephen had stayed in the marriage. Now it was clear that Lana had finally succeeded in ending his life. Detectives pieced together the timeline. From July 19th to July 21st, Lana slowly poisoned Stephen, watching him suffer. She never called for help, never tried to save him. She simply let him die. In August 2018, Lana Clayton was arrested and charged with killing her husband. Her calm demeanor during interrogations and her disturbing past painted a dark picture. Prosecutors argued that she had methodically planned Stephen's death, using an untraceable poison to avoid suspicion.
Either express or implied, killed Stephen Clayton by poisoning him the days leading up to his death.
But why? What would drive a woman to kill her husband so cruelly? Prosecutors believed the motive was financial. Stephen was wealthy, and Lana stood to inherit a fortune after his death. However, her attorneys presented a different story. They claimed she had suffered extreme trauma in her past. She endured a difficult childhood, faced trauma on a military base, and struggled with PTSD. During her trial, Lana spoke about her actions, saying that after learning she had poisoned her husband, she attempted to take her own life. But to the jury, her reasoning didn't justify what she had done. In 2023, after pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter, Lana Clayton was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Tears welled up in her eyes as she became emotional the moment the verdict was read. The judge, unimpressed with her excuses, called her actions a tangled web of lies.
Ruthlessly, the defendant hand-delivered glass after glass of poison that ultimately killed him.
Stephen's family was devastated. The fact that she had let Stephen suffer for 3 days made it clear this was not an accident. The case of Lana Clayton is one of deep betrayal. A husband who trusted his wife, a marriage that should have been built on love, ended in a slow and tragic killing. It's chilling to think that something as innocent as eye drops could be used as a weapon. In the end, justice was served, but no amount of prison time can bring Stephen Clayton back. Our next case is even more disturbing, where a woman's thirst for revenge turned into a pitiless crime.
I am so very sorry for a life being taken by my hands. Thank you very much for your time and consideration in this matter.
On March 30th, 2015, in Fall River, Massachusetts, a dispute over $50 took a tragic turn. 39-year-old Adrian Brown and 53-year-old Brian Jones had a heated argument, which resulted in Jones suffering serious injuries. Brown claimed it was self-defense, but the prosecution argued it was an intentional act. Earlier that day, Jones had confronted Brown's 19-year-old daughter, demanding repayment of a $50 debt. Witnesses said the argument lasted nearly 15 minutes. Some heard Jones making threats, saying he would harm the girl. Others claimed he was just asking for his money. When Brown came home from work, she immediately confronted Jones. Witnesses heard her raising her voice. The two got into an argument, and at one point, Jones reportedly said, "Do what you're going to do." Moments later, Brown injured him multiple times on the left side. After being injured, Jones didn't react immediately. He walked across the street, took out his phone, and lifted his shirt to reveal a serious wound. He sought help, but as he spoke, he collapsed on the pavement. He was rushed to St. Anne's Hospital, where he sadly passed away. Police found a box cutter in Jones's pocket, but it had never been used. The prosecution argued that he never threatened Brown with a weapon, while Brown's defense insisted that she had picked up a knife Jones had dropped and used it to protect herself. During the trial, the prosecution portrayed Brown as someone acting out of rage. Witnesses claimed that after stabbing Jones, she told neighbors, "Go check your boy," before driving off. The prosecution insisted this was evidence that Brown was not afraid, but had attacked Jones intentionally. The defense, however, highlighted the drastic size difference between Brown and Jones. At 5 foot 1 inch and 115 pounds, Brown was much smaller than the 6 foot, 209 pound Jones. They argued that she had no room to escape and feared for her life. The prosecution suggested that Brown was furious because Jones had disrespected her daughter earlier that day. They claimed she confronted him with the intent to harm him. However, the defense insisted Brown was simply protecting herself from a much larger, aggressive man. The jury was left with a difficult decision, but at last, the verdict determined her fate.
Miss Brown did not intend to kill Mr. Jones, but she did intend to take the law into her own hands, and she did intend to do it while armed with a knife.
Brown was convicted for Brian's killing and sentenced to 12 years in prison. However, she gets emotional when the verdict is read. This case sparked debate about self-defense laws and personal protection. Did Brown truly fear for her life, or did she let her emotions take control? Whatever the jury decided, one thing was certain: this tragic encounter changed lives forever. Our next case is truly dread, where a woman orchestrates a sinister plot to kill her husband.
I begged him multiple times to please to break away from her because she was a money and soul-sucking evil.
In 2020, a quiet neighborhood in West Des Moines, Iowa, became the center of a chilling crime. Gowan Park, a respected assistant professor of economics at Simpson College, was charged with the killing of her husband, Sung-Woo Nam. What first appeared to be a tragic case of harming oneself quickly unraveled into something far more sinister. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing story of control, deception, and a shocking confession. On February 15, 2020, police arrived at Park and Nam's house to find a troubling scene. They found 41-year-old Nam in distress, unresponsive, and beyond help. Park told officers that her husband had tied himself up. She claimed he had a history of harming thoughts and had even tried to harm himself 2 years earlier. However, investigators immediately noticed something strange. Nam's restraints were far too tight for him to have done it himself. When questioned, Park initially told officers that she had fallen asleep while watching television, and upon waking up, found Nam tied to the chair, leaning forward onto the floor. She claimed she had immediately cut him loose. Detectives, however, were skeptical. When they asked her to sign a Miranda waiver, a legal document that would allow formal questioning. She refused. Police decided to withhold the fact that Nam was already dead, hoping she would slip up and reveal more details. The next day, Park returned to the police station on her own. This time, she signed the waiver and allowed officers to access her phone. That's when her story changed. She admitted to tying Nam up, but claimed it was at his request. She also stated that she had gently placed a towel on him before wrapping a rope around his neck. However, the autopsy results told a different story. Nam had not died by suicide. This was now officially a homicide case. After hours of questioning, Park's version of events shifted once again. She admitted that the night before his death, Nam had been upset and had broken a mirror inside their car. When they returned home, she said Nam asked to be tied up so he wouldn't hurt himself or damage anything else. She claimed she used zip ties and rope to restrain him, including wrapping a cord around his neck. But Nam's family strongly disagreed with her claims. They testified in court that Park was the true mistreater in the relationship and that Nam had suffered for years in silence. Park continued to insist that she had no intention of harming her husband. She claimed she was simply doing what he had asked. However, investigators believed she was lying. The way Nam was bound, the force used to restrain him, and the inconsistencies in Park's statement all pointed to one chilling conclusion. This was no accident. On April 25, 2020, Park appeared in court and entered an Alford plea, a legal move where she did not admit guilt but acknowledged that the prosecution had enough evidence to convict her at trial. The judge sentenced her to 10 years in prison, with her sentence running concurrently. Additionally, she was ordered to pay $150,000 in restitution to Nam's family.
Counts 1, 2, and 3 shall run concurrently with one another.
As the sentence was read, Nam's family broke down in tears. On the other side, tears welled up in Park's eyes. They had lost a beloved son, brother, and friend in a way they never could have imagined. Their emotional testimonies in court made it clear, and they wanted justice for Nam. Even Park's own family wept as she was led away in handcuffs. This case serves as a tragic reminder that behind closed doors, relationships are not always what they seem. Whether this was a crime of passion, control, or something even darker, one fact remains. Sungwoo Nam's life ended too soon, and his family will forever grieve his loss. Up next is Tiffany Moss, a case that shocked many due to the horrific harm that led to an unimaginable tragedy.
She was in a bad state.
Aman, did you take her to the doctor then?
I did not take her to the doctor, sir.
On the morning of Halloween night, November 1st, 2013, a heartbreaking report was submitted in Lawrenceville, Georgia. A father filled with regret reported that his 10-year-old daughter, Imani Moss, had passed away. But the story he told the police didn't add up. When officers arrived at the apartment complex, they discovered something horrifying: an appropriate trash can, and inside, the remains of a missing girl. Imani's early life was already difficult. Her mother, struggling with substance addiction, lost custody of her when she was just a baby. Her father, Iman Moss, tried to raise her, but everything changed when he met and married a woman named Tiffany Moss. At first, Tiffany seemed like a loving stepmother. She was a preschool teacher, and they lived what appeared to be a normal family life. But behind closed doors, Imani was being treated differently. The mistreatment started when Imani was just 6 years old. When she confided in a school nurse about her fears, authorities discovered concerning marks on her body. Tiffany was arrested and charged with child cruelty, but instead of being sent to jail, she was given probation. After a few months, Imani was sent back home. That was the moment everything got worse. For years, Tiffany isolated Imani from the outside world. She pulled her out of school and told people she was homeschooling her. But in reality, Imani was being locked away, inhumanely ignored, and slowly deprived. By the summer of 2013, Imani had disappeared from public view. Family members barely saw her. Neighbors had no idea she existed. And as the months passed, she became weaker and weaker. Then, one night in October, Iman Moss came home from work to find his daughter shaking uncontrollably. She was too weak to stand, too weak to even speak. Instead of taking her to a doctor, Tiffany told him to leave her alone. A few days later, on October 28, 2013, Imani died. But rather than calling the police, Tiffany had a chilling plan. Tiffany convinced Iman that if they reported Imani's death, they would lose their other children, She told them that they had to cover it up, and so they wrapped Amani in blankets, left her in a room for days, and carried on as if nothing had happened. On Halloween night, they attempted to dispose of the evidence by placing it in a trash can and taking it to an empty field. They tried to destroy it with fire, but when that failed, they ended up bringing the trash can back home. For days, Amani lived in fear, knowing what had happened was wrong. Finally, in the early hours of November 1st, they called the officers, but when the officers arrived, he didn't tell them the full truth. He claimed Amani had accidentally consumed chemicals. It didn't take long for investigators to figure out the real story. During the trial, prosecutors explained why Tiffany had treated Amani so cruelly. Years earlier, after being charged with child maltreatment, Tiffany lost her job as a preschool teacher.
Amani was nothing. She was a nuisance. She was ugly.
She placed the blame on Amani, and over time her resentment grew. Instead of providing proper care, she began to neglect her needs, resulting in a tragic outcome. Amani's father later admitted that he had been too afraid to stand up to his wife. He worked 2 jobs, rarely home, and when he saw what was happening, he did nothing to stop it. In the end, his silence made him just as guilty. Amani Moss pleaded guilty to his role in the crime and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But Tiffany Moss refused to take responsibility. She represented herself in court, refused legal help, and barely spoke during the trial. It didn't take long for the jury to reach a decision. On May 1st, 2019, Tiffany Moss was sentenced to death, the first woman in Georgia to receive the death penalty in over 70 years. However, she remained silent and motionless, even when her death penalty verdict was read. Amani's case changed the way Georgia handles child maltreatment reports. It led to reforms in the child welfare system, forcing authorities to take warning signs more seriously. But for those who knew and loved Amani, those changes came too late. She was a little girl who deserved love, care, and a future. Instead, she was failed by the very people who were supposed to protect her. Even today, people remember Amani Moss, not just for the tragedy of her death, but for the change her story brought to the world. Our next case is about cold-blooded betrayal, where the culprit's mother and daughter were caught by their diary.
Rachel didn't want her to die at home.
Why not?
Because after Sean died.
Diana Stotty, with her daughter Rachel, fatally poisoned her husband Mark and son Sean using toxic coolant in 2012. They also attempted to kill their daughter Sarah. Diane received a life sentence without parole. The Stotty family appeared to be a normal household, but behind closed doors, a dark secret was brewing. Over 5 months in 2012, family members began dying mysteriously, one after another. When investigators uncovered the shocking truth, they realized the deaths weren't accidents or natural causes. They were cold-blooded killers. Diane Stotty, a nurse and church organist, lived in Springfield, Missouri with her husband, Mark, and their 4 children, Sean, Sarah, Rachel, and a 9-year-old daughter. Diane was the family's primary provider, as Mark's career as a musician brought in little income. But something was disturbing about Diane. She had clear favorites. She adored her daughter Rachel, but viewed the rest of her family as burdens. In April 2012, Mark Stotty suddenly passed away. He had been feeling unwell for days, but no one suspected anything sinister. His cause of death was ruled natural, and he was cremated without an autopsy. Then, in September 2012, Diane's 26-year-old son Sean, who was on the autism spectrum, also died under similar circumstances. Again, doctors found nothing suspicious, and his body was also cremated. The family seemed to move on, except for one person. Sarah, Diane's 24-year-old daughter, started experiencing severe health issues. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, her organs shutting down. This time, doctors knew something wasn't right. As Sarah fought for her life, a concerned pastor contacted the police. He had noticed Diane's strange behavior. She wasn't grieving her husband and son. Instead, she was active on Facebook, posting photos of Rachel and even planning a vacation. Investigators began looking into the case and quickly noticed a pattern. Mark, Sean, and Sarah had all shown similar symptoms before falling ill, symptoms that pointed to poisoning. When police questioned Diane, she showed no emotion, but soon the truth unraveled. Diane, with the help of Rachel, had been poisoning her family members with a toxic coolant.
So you didn't want her to die in the house? Mm-hmm. And you guys, explain to me why you waited to the point.
Diane and Rachel had ordered toxic coolant online, specifically choosing a kind that didn't contain a bittering agent, making it tasteless. They mixed it into sports drinks and sodas, slowly poisoning their victims over time. Rachel had even documented their plans in a diary, writing a chilling note. Only the quiet ones will be left. My mother, my little sister, and me. Detectives also discovered that Diane had already spent Mark's $20,000 life insurance payout. But her crimes didn't stop there. She had planned to poison her youngest daughter next. When asked why she did it, Diane gave shocking answers. She claimed Mark was lazy and didn't contribute enough. She said Sean was worse than a pest and didn't socialize well due to his autism. She wanted Sarah gone because she didn't want to pay off her student loans. And after Sarah, she planned to kill her 9-year-old daughter because of her learning disabilities. Rachel, who had helped her mother, admitted she initially felt Sean's death was unfair, but she still went along with the plan. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Diane and Rachel confessed. Rachel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for testifying against her mother. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Diane, the mastermind, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. However, she didn't show any shame for her heinous act. Sarah, the only surviving victim, suffered permanent organ and neurological damage. Despite everything, she chose to forgive her mother, saying, "I prefer to be a survivor rather than a victim." The youngest daughter, whose identity remains private, was placed in foster care, escaping the fate her mother had planned for her. The public was horrified by the case. Diane had not only killed her family members, but she had done so without remorse, posting cheerful updates on social media and planning vacations as if nothing had happened. Had Sarah not survived, Diane might have gotten away with it all. But in the end, justice caught up with her. The Stodty family deaths stand as a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest danger comes from within. Our next case is about deadly deception, a woman who stopped at nothing to eliminate the one person standing in her way.
I strongly suggested for him not to get the money.
In 2010, Vanessa Cameron orchestrated the killing of her ex-boyfriend, Samuel Johnson Jr., to claim a $750,000 life insurance policy. Initially sentenced to 70 years, her conviction was overturned on appeal. In a 2019 retrial, she received a life sentence. On a quiet evening in January 2010, 26-year-old Samuel Allen Johnson Jr., a VIA bus driver and devoted father, vanished without a trace. His sudden disappearance left his family and friends searching for answers. But what started as a missing person case soon took a dark turn. Vanessa Cameron, the daughter of a retired San Antonio police officer, was in financial trouble. Investigators later uncovered her sinister motive. Samuel's life insurance policy promised a hefty payout. Rather than solving her money troubles, she plotted his demise. As investigators looked into Samuel's disappearance, evidence began to pile up against Vanessa. It was clear that his death was not an accident or a tragic coincidence. It was premeditated. In 2012, Vanessa was convicted of his death and sentenced to 70 years in prison. However, a legal technicality during jury selection overturned her conviction in 2014, giving her a second chance at freedom. During her trial, Vanessa made a disturbing claim. She told the jury that Samuel wanted to die and that the attack was his idea. "I told him, yes, that was the best plan he'd ever come up with," she admitted. But prosecutors didn't buy it, and neither did the jury. In 2024, Vanessa Cameron was back in court for a retrial. This time, the evidence was even more damning. The jury listened as she tried once again to justify her role in the crime, but her own words betrayed her. With overwhelming evidence against her, Vanessa Cameron was sentenced to life in prison. Her previous 70-year sentence was nothing compared to the final verdict. She would now spend the rest of her life behind bars. However, she had no remorse for her act.
The charge in this case is a murder charge.
For Samuel's family, justice had finally been served. After years of court battles, they could finally find some peace knowing the person responsible for his death would never walk free again. This case is a chilling reminder that greed can drive people to commit unthinkable acts, but justice always prevails in the end. Our next case is about a ruthless act of revenge, a woman who pulled the trigger and never looked back.
How many times did you shoot?
Until it would shoot no more.
On May 15, 2012, in Delta, Alabama, a tragic event unfolded at a lakeside pier. Tracy Grissom, a 32-year-old mother of two, called an emergency after she shot her ex-husband, Hunter Grissom. She claimed it was self-defense, saying she feared for her safety because of past incidents. But as investigators looked deeper, they found conflicting details that led to an important question. Was this truly an act of self-defense, or was there another reason behind her actions? Tracy shared that Hunter had hurt her in the past, saying an incident 18 months earlier had left her feeling unsafe. She provided photos of marks and injuries, insisting they were proof of what she had endured. She believed that the justice system had failed to protect her, and on that fateful day, she felt she had no choice but to defend herself. However, as investigators reviewed the evidence, they noticed some contradictions. Medical reports from the past incident described her injuries as minor, and phone records suggested she had been active when she claimed to be unconscious. This raised serious questions. What happened between Tracy and Hunter?
Name is Tracy? Yeah. Okay, you killed your husband? Ex-husband, yes.
Initially, when investigators arrived at the location, after listing the emergency call, they found Tracy there. But when they dug deeper, they treated the case as a possible household chaos situation. But as they examined the details, they became uncertain about Tracy's version of events. She told police she had gone to Hunter's workplace to take photos for a legal matter. She claimed he moved towards her aggressively, which made her fear for her safety. However, forensic evidence showed that Hunter was unarmed, and the number of times she acted in defense seemed excessive. Additionally, the photos Tracy had used as proof of past harm. The sequence of images suggested changes that raised doubts about how and when the injuries occurred. During the trial, Tracy's account was closely examined. The prosecution argued that this was not a moment of fear, but rather a planned action. They pointed out how later she returned to the scene with a news crew and calmly described what had happened, showing little distress. Meanwhile, Hunter's family painted a different picture, insisting he was not the dangerous person she claimed. They presented phone records, hospital reports, and other evidence that cast doubt on her allegations. The jury faced a difficult decision. Was Tracy truly in danger that day, or was there another motive at play? Prosecutors believe that Tracy's true motive was financial and emotional. She and Hunter had been in a long legal dispute over money, and she had a significant insurance policy in place. Some argued that removing him from her life would not only end their conflicts, but also provide financial security. After carefully reviewing all the evidence, the jury found Tracy guilty of killing. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. As soon as the verdict was read, Tracy got emotional and tears started to shed from her eyes. The outcome left many divided. Some believed she acted out of desperation, while others saw it as a carefully planned decision. The case of Tracy Grissom is a tragic reminder of how past conflicts and emotions can lead to devastating consequences. A man lost his life, a mother lost her freedom, and 2 children were left without their parents, leaving many to wonder if this tragedy could have been prevented. Our next case is about calculated cruelty. A woman who thought she could cover up a vicious crime and get away with it.
Who are those letters from?
Those letters are from Amanda Hayes.
Okay. And they indicate on the envelopes that...
On July 13, 2011, 27-year-old Laura Ackerson suddenly disappeared. She was a loving mother, caught in a difficult custody battle with her ex-boyfriend, Grant Hayes. At first, her disappearance was a mystery, but as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a chilling story. Laura and Grant had a turbulent history. Though their relationship had ended, they remained tied through their 2 young sons. Their custody battle was intense, with Laura fighting to stay involved in their children's lives. Meanwhile, Grant had remarried Amanda Hayes, who, according to prosecutors, resented Laura and wanted her gone for good. When Laura failed to show up for work and stopped answering calls, her loved ones grew concerned. A missing persons report was filed, and the police immediately began searching for answers. 2 weeks later, a horrifying discovery was made. Laura's remains were found in a Texas creek near Amanda's sister's home. Her body had been dismembered, and investigators believed she had suffered severe injuries before her death. However, due to decomposition, the exact cause of death remained uncertain. As the investigation continued, suspicion fell on Grant and Amanda. The prosecution argued that both played a role in Laura's tragic death. Grant was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, while Amanda was initially charged as an accessory. Grant claimed that Amanda was responsible for Laura's death and that he had only helped to dispose of the body out of love for his wife. Meanwhile, Amanda insisted that she had no part in the crime and was forced to help out of fear. Prosecutors argued that Amanda resented Laura because of the ongoing custody battle between Grant and his ex. They claimed Grant and Amanda saw Laura as an obstacle and took drastic measures to eliminate her from their lives. However, Amanda's lawyers claimed she was not fully responsible for her actions because Grant controlled and influenced her. They argued that Grant was both dangerous and charismatic, which allowed him to manipulate Amanda into doing what he wanted. Essentially, she was a victim of his influence rather than acting on her own. The case went to trial, where 49 witnesses testified over 13 days. Amanda took the stand in her defense, but the jury ultimately did not believe her version of events. After 11 hours of deliberation, she was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge made it clear Amanda had a choice. She could have done something to stop what happened to Laura, but instead, she participated. She was sentenced to 13 to 16 and a half years in prison, while Grant had already been sentenced to life without parole. During sentencing, Amanda apologized to Laura's family, saying she was deeply sorry. However, Laura's father did not believe her. He called Amanda a manipulator and said her words meant nothing. The case left many questions. Was Amanda truly a victim of Grant's influence? Or was she just as responsible? No matter what, the heartbreaking reality remained. Laura Ackerson's life was taken too soon, leaving behind 2 young children who would grow up without their mother. Up next is Elisa Baker, whose deception and actions led to a heartbreaking case that left a young girl voiceless and a community searching for justice.
Of the 1,200 inmates here, Elisa Baker is the most hated. So much so, for her own protection, she spends her days in isolation.
This little girl, a survivor, who survives cancer, not once but twice, including bone and lung cancer. We know now that she is not only dead, but dismembered.
October 9th, 2010, Hickory, North Carolina. A frantic 911 call came in. 10-year-old Zara Baker was missing. Her stepmother, Elisa Baker, told police that Zara had been kidnapped. But as investigators arrived at the home, something felt off. Zara wasn't just any child. She had lost her left leg to bone cancer and wore hearing aids in both ears. Despite her struggles, she was known for her bright spirit and big smile. But now her room was empty, her prosthetic leg left behind. As the investigation unfolded, the truth became more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. Elisa Baker played the role of a devastated stepmother, pleading for Zara's return. But her story kept changing. Then, a major breakthrough. Police found a ransom note. It claimed Zara had been taken, but something was off. The writing was messy, rushed, and after forensic testing, it matched Elisa Baker's handwriting. The so-called kidnapping was a cover-up. Investigators turned their focus to Elisa and her husband, Adam Baker. But when they pressed Adam, he claimed he had no idea what happened to Zara. He believed Elisa had handled everything while he worked long hours. Days turned into weeks. Elisa eventually cracked, but what she revealed left detectives horrified. Search teams scoured multiple sites across North Carolina. Piece by piece, Zara's remains were recovered. Her prosthetic leg was found in a creek. Days later, her skull was discovered in the woods. The rest of her body never fully recovered.
It's the sad discovery US police always suspected they would make, confirming Australian-born Zara Baker is no longer missing.
We have recovered enough physical evidence to believe we have found Zara.
When Elisa was arrested, she showed no real emotion, no tears, no remorse, just a cold, detached demeanor. She blamed Adam for everything, but the evidence pointed at her as the mastermind. Elisa Baker had a long history of cruelty and manipulation. She had a trail of ex-husbands, financial fraud, and physical harm allegations. But with Zara, her cruelty escalated. Elisa resented taking care of a sick child, especially one that wasn't hers. Zara endured years of verbal and physical harm at Elisa's hands. In a shocking confession, Elisa admitted that Zara died accidentally in their home. But instead of calling for help, Elisa and Adam dismembered her body and scattered the remains across different locations to cover up the crime. Zara's final moments remain unclear, but one thing was certain: this was no accident. Elisa Baker struck a plea deal, avoiding a first-degree murder charge. Instead, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, obstruction of justice, and bigamy. Yes, she even lied about being legally married to Adam. Her sentence? 10 years. 10 years for a crime so heinous it shocked an entire nation. Zara's life was cut short, and her killer would walk free before she would even have graduated high school.
There are no words to explain the hate I have for you.
Zara Baker's biological mother, Emily Dietrich, called it an act of pure evil.
Zara was pulled apart like some human puzzle and discarded like rubbish for wildlife to graze.
The courtroom was filled with anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. Zara's biological mother, who lived in Australia, was inconsolable. The judge called Elisa's actions pure evil, but Elisa, she sat emotionless. No breakdown, no apology, just the same empty stare. The public was outraged. People demanded harsher punishment, saying Zara never got justice. Even after her release, Elisa remains one of the most despised criminals in North Carolina's history. Our next case is just as chilling. Rebecca Frick, a mother whose uncontrollable rage led to an unthinkable act.
24-year-old Rebecca Frick, emotional, being taken back into custody. The Erie resident is accused of trying to kill 38-year-old Michelle Muir by hitting her with her car.
A summer night in Erie, Pennsylvania, turned into a scene of chaos when Rebecca Frick, a 24-year-old woman, let her rage take control. What started as a petty argument quickly escalated into something far more dangerous, an act of pure, reckless violence that left one woman dead in the middle of the street. It all began with an argument over a dog. Rebecca Frick and Michelle Muir, 38, got into a heated fight outside a home on Parade Street in August 2017. Witnesses later said the dispute spiraled out of control, with shouting echoing through the quiet neighborhood. But no one expected what came next. In a fit of rage, Frick stormed into her car, slammed the door, and turned the ignition. Michelle was standing in the street when Frick hit the gas, accelerating straight towards her. There was no hesitation. She plowed into Michelle with full force, sending her body flying across the pavement. Instead of stopping, Frick sped away, leaving the scene and Michelle bleeding out on the ground. By the time emergency responders arrived, it was too late. Michelle was pronounced dead at the hospital. The community was in shock. This wasn't a tragic accident. This was a murder. Frick didn't turn herself in. Instead, she tried to cover her tracks, acting as if nothing had happened. But witnesses identified her car, and police tracked her down within hours. When confronted, Frick showed visible remorse as she was taken into court, but that didn't take away the reckless crime she committed that night. She was charged with third-degree murder, homicide by vehicle, and leaving the scene of an accident. But as the trial began, her defense team argued that it wasn't intentional, claiming that Frick panicked and made a terrible mistake. The jury wasn't buying it. The evidence was undeniable. Frick had full control of her car. She had every opportunity to stop, but she didn't. When the verdict was read, the courtroom was silent. Frick was sentenced up to 40 years in prison for third-degree murder. She wouldn't be eligible for parole for at least 16 years. Her reckless decision had stolen a life, and now she would spend decades behind bars paying the price. Prosecutors argued that Frick's motive was fueled by uncontrollable rage and impulse. The fight had pushed her to the edge, and in a moment of fury, she chose to end Michelle's life rather than walk away. But the question remained, was this a crime of passion? Or was Frick simply a dangerous person who had no regard for human life?
This sentence allows the family to receive a sense of justice as well as the finality that they've been longing for. And so we're satisfied with this outcome.
Michelle's family broke down in tears as the sentence was announced. For them, justice had been served, but it wouldn't bring Michelle back. Her friends described her as kind, caring, and full of life, a woman who had so much more to give. Now, all they had were memories. As for Frick, although there were visible tears, no apology was given to the victim's family. Just the harsh reality that her one moment of rage had destroyed two lives, Michelle's and her own. Rebecca Frick's impulsive rage led to a devastating tragedy, but the next case is even more disturbing. Cheyenne Harris, a mother who let her own child suffer in the most unimaginable way.
Chickasaw County 911.
It's a scene straight from a nightmare.
What I took away was the pain and the trauma of the first responder. That person's life is never going to be the same again.
On August 30th, 2017, Cheyenne Harris and Zachary Cohen made a 911 call that sent shockwaves through Alta Vista, Iowa. When paramedics arrived at their small apartment, they were met with a scene so horrifying that even seasoned professionals were left shaken. In the corner of a dark, sweltering room, a 4-month-old baby, Sterling Cohen, sat in a mechanical swing, motionless, lifeless, and surrounded by a sickening stench. What should have been a routine medical response quickly turned into a crime scene investigation.
Okay, what's going on?
Around 9, my girlfriend went to feed our son, and then about 11 or 11:30, she went to check on him, and he was gone.
Gone meaning?
He died.
The details that emerged were beyond disturbing. Baby Sterling Cohen had been left in that swing for an extended period, completely neglected. His fragile body showed signs of severe rash and infection, and the conditions he endured led to a tragic and preventable loss of life. The lack of care had devastating effects, making it clear that he had been left alone in his final days. The autopsy revealed that Sterling had been left in the same room for a couple of weeks, while his parents went about their lives, completely ignoring him. But the most chilling part, Cheyenne Harris and Zachary Cohen lived in the same apartment. They had food, water, and electricity, yet they let their babies suffer and die in agony while they did nothing. What could drive a mother to such unimaginable cruelty? Prosecutors pointed to injected addiction. Harris and Cohen had a history of substance use, and authorities believed that Sterling's death was not due to ignorance, but complete neglect, fueled by addiction. Harris's defense team tried to claim that she was suffering from postpartum depression, but experts dismissed this, arguing that her deliberate neglect showed something far darker. When investigators interviewed Harris, her responses were cold and detached. She didn't break down in tears or plead for forgiveness. Instead, she downplayed her role, claiming she didn't realize how bad things had gotten. But the evidence painted a different picture. The apartment was clean, with functioning utilities and stocked food supplies. The only thing that had been left behind was her child. Prosecutors wasted no time in charging both parents with first-degree murder and child endangerment. But Cheyenne Harris's trial became the focus, as people struggled to understand how a mother could let her own infant son suffer such a horrific fate. The trial was swift and brutal. The jury took less than 4 hours to convict Cheyenne Harris of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree.
Her co-defendant, Zachary Cohen, was also found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. In the end, the judge did not hold back, stating that Sterling's death was one of the most disturbing cases the courtroom had ever seen. Harris, once a young mother with her whole life ahead of her, would now spend the rest of her days behind bars, haunted by what she had done. In court, Harris finally showed emotion, but only when confronted with graphic photos of her son's body. She sobbed, rocking back and forth as if reality had finally hit. But to the jury and the public, her tears were too little, too late. Sterling's grandparents, who had no idea how bad things had gotten, were devastated. The community was outraged, with people questioning how no one had stepped in sooner. But the truth was clear. Cheyenne Harris had every opportunity to save her son, and she chose not to. Her self-destruction was complete. Once a mother, now a monster. A mother's neglect led to an unthinkable tragedy, but in the next case, the crime wasn't just about indifference. Taylor Parker wanted a baby of her own, and she was willing to kill to get one.
Family members had to leave the courtroom before crime scene investigators and the medical examiner detailed evidence of a bloody, violent, and extended attack on the morning of the murders.
On October 9, 2020, a Texas state trooper pulled over a woman speeding down a highway near the Texas-Oklahoma border. In the passenger seat, wrapped in a blanket, was what Taylor Parker claimed was her newborn baby. She told the trooper she had just given birth, but something was off. Minutes later, back in New Boston, Texas, a chilling 911 call came through. A woman had been murdered in her own home, and her unborn baby was missing. The horror that unfolded would expose one of the most twisted crimes in Texas history. Taylor Parker had built a life on lies. For months, she had convinced friends, family, and even her boyfriend that she was pregnant. She staged fake ultrasounds, faked doctor's visits, and even hosted a gender reveal party. But the truth, she was never pregnant. Desperate to keep up the act, Parker needed a baby, and she was willing to kill for one. Her target was 21-year-old Reagan Simmons Hancock, a mother of 1 and 8 months pregnant. The two had known each other through mutual connections, and Parker saw an opportunity. On the morning of October 9th, Parker arrived at Reagan's home under the pretense of a friendly visit. But what happened next was pure brutality. Parker's motive was as twisted as the crime itself. She wanted to convince her boyfriend she was pregnant so he wouldn't leave her. She believed that stealing a baby and passing it off as her own would solidify her fantasy life. But her obsession spiraled into cold-blooded murder. Her entire pregnancy was a lie, and as the months ticked down, she knew she needed a baby to complete her illusion. Reagan Simmons Hancock was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Inside Reagan's home, Parker launched a brutal attack. She struck Reagan in the head at least 5 times with a hammer, then stabbed her over 100 times in a frenzied assault. Reagan fought for her life, but Parker overpowered her, eventually cutting the baby from her womb with a scalpel. Reagan's 3-year-old daughter was asleep in the next room. Parker fled the scene, taking the newborn with her, leaving Reagan to die alone in a pool of blood. By the time first responders arrived, it was too late. Reagan was dead, and the baby who had never taken a breath outside the womb, was gone. When Parker was pulled over later that morning, she still clung to the stolen baby, desperately trying to maintain her lie. But the trooper saw through it. Within hours, Parker was arrested for murder. Parker's arrest unraveled her elaborate scheme, exposing the twisted lengths she went to in order to fake her pregnancy. Prosecutors called it one of the most brutal, calculated crimes they had ever seen. During the trial, jurors sat in shock as forensic experts detailed the violent attack. The evidence was overwhelming. Parker had planned every step leading up to the murder. It took the jury less than 2 hours to convict her of capital murder and kidnapping. The judge handed down a death sentence, ensuring Parker would never walk free again. In court, Parker showed little emotion, even as Reagan's family sobbed while detailing their unimaginable loss.
A heavy burden feels lifted. I feel like now we can start trying to heal. We don't have this over our heads. We know where she's going to be, we know where she's at, and she's taken care of.
Reagan's mother stared Parker down, telling her that she had ripped apart their family in the most violent way possible. Reagan's husband and daughter were left to live with the nightmare of what had been stolen from them. For many, the sentence felt like justice, but nothing could undo the horror of what Parker had done. From a web of lies to a chilling crime, Taylor Parker's story is a haunting reminder of just how far some will go to maintain an illusion. A woman so obsessed with a fake pregnancy that she was willing to kill for it. But in the next case, the crime spanned decades. Virginia McCullough's shocking secret went undiscovered for years until authorities unearthed a truth that left a community in disbelief.
I did know that this would kind of come eventually. It's proper that I serve my punishment. Cheer up, at least you caught the bad guy.
For 4 years, no one suspected a thing. Friends and neighbors believed Virginia McCullough's parents, John and Janice McCullough, had simply moved away. But behind the doors of their Essex home, a dark secret festered. Their bodies lay hidden in a makeshift tomb, while Virginia continued her daily life as if nothing had happened. The truth behind their gruesome fate would only come to light after a shocking confession, one that left police struggling to comprehend the depths of her deception. In August 2019, Virginia murdered both her parents, though exactly how she did it remains unclear. What is known is that John and Janice never left their home alive. Instead of reporting their deaths, Virginia wrapped their bodies in plastic and blankets, hiding them inside their home for years. She lied to family, friends, and neighbors, telling them her parents had moved abroad. She continued to collect their pensions, living in their house as if nothing had changed. But as time passed, suspicions grew. Relatives hadn't heard from John or Janice in years, and when the police were finally called for a welfare check in September 2023, Virginia's secret unraveled. She greeted the officers at the door with a chilling statement: "You've caught the bad guy." Inside, police found the decomposed remains of her parents, wrapped and hidden inside the home. Virginia McCullough's motive was a twisted mix of control, financial gain, and resentment. She had become dependent on her parents' money, relying on their pensions and savings to fund her life of deception. But there was more than greed driving her actions. Investigators discovered that Virginia had a history of conflict with her parents. Reports suggested that she resented their authority and felt trapped under their control. To her, their deaths weren't just about money, they were about freedom. By eliminating them, she was able to live her life on her own terms, without restrictions, without accountability, and without anyone questioning her. With her secret exposed, Virginia was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. In court, the disturbing details of her crime were laid bare. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman who had coldly planned the cover-up, deceiving everyone around her while living among the bodies of her victims. Her defense argued that mental health struggles played a role, but the jury wasn't convinced. Virginia McCullough was found guilty of both murders and sentenced to life in prison. For years, she had pretended her parents were still alive, but in the end, justice caught up with her. In the courtroom, the weight of the truth finally crashed down. Relatives of John and Janice were left stunned by the sheer horror of the crime. The idea that Virginia had lived for years with their bodies, lying to everyone she knew, was almost too much to process. To many, she wasn't just a murderer. She was a master manipulator, capable of keeping up a chilling charade for nearly half a decade. For her parents, there were no goodbyes, no final words, only a betrayal by the daughter they had raised. Up next, Sante Kimes, a con artist and killer whose life was marked by deception, greed, and ruthless ambition. Her crimes, committed alongside her son, exposed a chilling mother-son criminal partnership that shocked the nation.
Betrayal that's been given about us.
The media has so far portrayed us totally like we are not.
We're just a mother and son.
Sante Kimes, known as the Dragon Lady, was a notorious figure in the world of crime. Born in 1934, she led a criminal life filled with theft, fraud, arson, and ultimately, murder. Alongside her son, Kenneth Kimes Jr., she was involved in a series of heinous crimes that spanned many years. Their most notorious crime was the murder of Irene Silverman, a socialite from New York City, but their criminal activities didn't stop there. Sante's journey started with minor crimes and escalated to serious offenses. Sante used her charm and manipulation to convince people to assist her in her illegal activities, including her son, Kenneth Jr. Together, they were responsible for several murders. The turning point in their criminal lives came when Kenneth Jr. confessed to multiple murders. After years of dodging authorities, their web of lies began to fall apart. The FBI and other law enforcement agencies connected them to various crimes, including the murder of David Kasdan, another victim whose death was also orchestrated by Sante. Kenneth Jr. eventually reached a plea deal, agreeing to testify against his mother in exchange for a lighter sentence. Their trial for the murder of Silverman revealed the full extent of their crimes, and both were convicted of multiple charges, including murder and conspiracy.
You were sharing the apartment with your mother?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In 2000, Sante and Kenneth Jr. were sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Irene Silverman, as well as other crimes. Sante was sentenced to life without parole, plus 125 years, while Kenneth Jr. received a similar sentence. The trial brought to light not just the murder of Silverman, but also their involvement in other heinous acts like forgery, robbery, and arson. Despite their conviction, Sante continued to deny her involvement, blaming the authorities for framing her. She spent her remaining years in prison, where she died in 2014.
Trust me, it can happen to you. It can happen to your mother. It could happen to your son. We have done nothing wrong. The police overreacted. They are framing us.
The case of Sante and Kenneth Kimes is both chilling and heartbreaking. The sheer cruelty of their actions, particularly the way they manipulated those around them, left a lasting impact on the families of their victims. For many, it's hard to understand how a mother could be so involved in her son's crimes, turning him into a murderer. The story of Sante Kimes is a tragic reminder of how greed and manipulation can destroy lives, and how the pursuit of wealth can lead to the loss of humanity.
Funny, generous, bright red hair, and a personality to match. She really was awfully cute.
Kimes' story reveals how a mother-son duo can do horrific acts. However, our next case takes us to a quiet neighborhood where a shocking murder shattered a community's trust.
From Rentham Street in Dorchester, of Miss Galloway leaving on the morning of the 29th at approximately 9 a.m. with a can of bleach.
In 2017, a quiet neighborhood in Needham, Massachusetts became the backdrop for a horrifying crime. 51-year-old Tammy Galloway was convicted for the murder of her 81-year-old neighbor, Laura Shifrina. The murder occurred in Shifrina's apartment, and the details of the case were both tragic and shocking. On May 28, 2017, Laura Shifrina was last seen alive, going about her daily life as a retired scientist. However, just days later, her daughter discovered her body in her Linden Street apartment. Shifrina had not shown up for an event that evening, raising alarm among her family and friends. As authorities investigated, they discovered that Shifrina's apartment had been ransacked. Items like her car, wallet, cell phone, and jewelry were all gone. It seemed clear that something sinister had taken place.
The jury says there is enough evidence now to move forward with the case against a woman who's accused of killing her elderly neighbor in Needham.
The investigation uncovered a chilling series of clues. Shifrina's 2011 red Ford Fiesta was found abandoned with the keys still in the ignition, but the interior reeked of bleach. Surveillance footage from May 29th showed Galloway and a relative near the car, holding a bottle of bleach, suggesting a desperate attempt to cover up the crime. It was then that the horrifying truth came to light. Galloway had brutally stabbed Shifrina to death in her apartment, likely in a robbery gone wrong. Driven by greed, she stole Shifrina's cash, jewelry, and car, hoping to get her hands on the $3,000 Shifrina had saved for a dental procedure.
Police investigating a death of an 81-year-old woman found inside her apartment with what's being called sharp trauma. Authorities are investigating this as if it is a homicide.
After a tense trial, Tammy Galloway was found guilty of first-degree murder, armed robbery, and larceny. The case culminated in an emotional sentencing hearing where Shifrina's daughter spoke out. Galloway was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
During her sentencing today, Tammy Galloway apologized to the daughter and grandsons who stole money from her and then stole her car.
The case sent shockwaves through the community. The realization that someone from their neighborhood was capable of such a ruthless act was deeply unsettling. The anguish of losing a loved one in such a violent manner extended beyond Shafrina's family, leaving the entire town shaken. As for Galloway, her crimes have ensured that she will spend the rest of her life behind bars, forever marked by her unforgivable actions.
A former scientist.
Everyone in this community has been on the edge of their seat until the police had apprehended whoever this... So happy. I'm happy now.
The murder of Laura was a senseless act of greed. The next case isn't just about murder. It's about cruelty so extreme, it left an entire state horrified.
Now, the second disappointment was the love letters. The accused person discovered that the disease was still keeping many years after he broke up with the former girlfriends.
In 2015, Ruth Kamande's life changed forever. She was arrested and charged with the murder of her boyfriend, Farid Mohammed. Ruth stabbed Farid 25 times during a violent argument, and the case shocked the entire nation. In 2015, Ruth Kamande and her boyfriend, Farid Mohammed, got into a heated, tragic argument. It all started when Ruth found a small yellow card from the AIDS control program in Farid's room, revealing something he had kept from her. When she asked him about it, the conversation grew tense. Farid became upset and told Ruth that he would rather harm both of them than let anyone know his secret. The situation quickly turned dangerous, and Ruth felt scared for her life. They fought for control in the middle of the struggle, and a kitchen knife fell between them. Desperate to protect herself, Ruth acted in fear and overpowered Farid during the chaos. The tragic incident ended with Farid losing his life. Police quickly launched an investigation, gathering evidence from the crime scene, witness testimonies, and Ruth's account. As they pieced together the events of the violent altercation, Ruth was arrested shortly after. In court, she claimed she had acted in self-defense.
That the accused committed the offense and had acted on purpose. Kamande, who was later crowned Miss Langata Women's Prison, had appealed the sentence.
In 2018, Ruth Kamande's life reached a heartbreaking turning point. She stood before the court, facing the consequences of her actions. Despite sharing her story and explaining that she acted in self-defense during a moment of fear and danger, the judge found her guilty of murder. The courtroom fell silent as the judge announced the sentence: death. Although Ruth gives no reaction at the time of the sentence announcement.
With the clear intention to cause him pain, suffering, and death, and I've taken into account, I want young people to know that it is not cool to kill your boyfriend or girlfriend.
The decision sparked a wave of public debate. Some people felt sympathy for Ruth, believing she had acted to protect herself from harm. Others saw her actions differently and felt justice had been served. The case became widely discussed, with many questioning how the justice system should handle situations involving household conflicts and self-defense. After further review, Ruth's sentence was reduced from death to life imprisonment. Although she would spend the rest of her life behind bars, her story was not over. The experience marked the darkest chapter of her life, but it also became the beginning of a new path, one where she sought to grow, learn, and find a new purpose, even from within prison walls. Ruth's story didn't end there. While serving her sentence at Community Maximum Prison, she found a new path. She enrolled in law studies through a program by Justice Defenders, an organization that helps inmates and communities gain legal knowledge. In 2024, Ruth graduated with a law degree from the University of London. She shared her achievement with other inmates and wardens during a special ceremony, saying, "We're not only here to celebrate graduates, but people who have transformed and proved that something good can come out of prisons." The resolution of Ruth's story is bittersweet. She remains behind bars, serving a life sentence. She now uses her education to help fellow inmates navigate the justice system. Ruth has also appealed her case to the Supreme Court, hoping for a chance to tell her side of the story again, this time with the knowledge of the law on her side. Her journey brings a mix of emotions, sadness for a life lost, but also hope that even in darkness, people can find redemption and a new purpose. Ruth's tragic yet complex case left the world in turmoil. Our next case reveals how someone can be labeled a serial killer and spend years fighting to prove their innocence.
In corso, alla luce anche delle motivazioni della Suprema Corte di Cassazione, e quindi esprimiamo una soddisfazione che è di tipo professionale processuale.
Daniela Pagliali was an Italian nurse accused of killing 38 of her patients. The case stirred a lot of controversy and shocked many. However, in 2021, after a thorough reanalysis of the hospital's mortality data, it was found that the statistics used to charge her were flawed. This led to Daniela's acquittal and eventual freedom. Daniela's life took a drastic turn when the prosecution relied heavily on hospital mortality data and the controversial photo, interpreting it as evidence of Daniela's guilt. However, after her conviction, doubts began to surface regarding the validity of the data used to support the charges against her. The investigations, once thorough, failed to account for certain inconsistencies in the statistics, raising questions about whether the case against Daniela had been built on flawed assumptions. The charges were severe, and as a result, Daniela was disbarred and spent over 1,000 days in prison. One of the key points of contention was a photo she took with a 102-year-old patient who passed away, which some interpreted as suspicious. The accusations painted Daniela as a serial killer, and she was thrown into a lengthy and painful legal battle. She was sentenced to life imprisonment after being found guilty of their murders. However, she showed no remorse because somewhere she knew she was not a killer.
È stata quindi accolta la richiesta del procuratore generale di annullare con rinvio l'ultima sentenza.
After spending over 3 long years behind bars, Daniela's life took a surprising turn. Her case, which had shocked many, was revisited. It all started with a deep dive into the hospital mortality data. Experts reanalyzed the numbers, and what they discovered were hidden factors that challenged the original conclusion about Daniela's involvement in the deaths of her patients. The new evidence led to doubt about the fairness of the charges against her.
Difficult patients, either because the relatives were demanding or because it was difficult to take care of the patient.
In January 2023, the Supreme Court made a powerful decision. They overturned the previous verdicts, declaring Daniela innocent. This moment was nothing short of a miracle for her. After years of being wrongly accused, Daniela was finally free. Her life, which had been turned upside down, was now being set right.
Prosecutors are investigating whether Poggielli could be responsible for the deaths of 38 people.
It was a second chance, a chance to rebuild everything she had lost. Daniela could finally return to her family, and she began dreaming of the future she thought she might never have. Despite the immense pain and confusion she had endured, she remained confident in her skills as a nurse. With her name cleared, she hoped to go back to her nursing career, where she had once felt a sense of purpose. Daniela's story is one of resilience and hope. After enduring years of hardship, she now looks forward to rebuilding her life and career. The emotional toll of being wrongly accused and imprisoned is clear, but Daniela's determination to regain her freedom and continue her work as a nurse shows her strength and optimism for the future. Daniela Poggielli spent years behind bars for crimes she didn't commit, but the next case reveals the darkest depths of human cruelty.
She was so skinny that she didn't have anything on her. She was just skinny, and she just was.
Angela Darlene McAnulty's heartbreaking story began in 2009 when her 15-year-old daughter, Jeanette Maples, was discovered unresponsive in their Eugene, Oregon home. Jeanette was severely lean and dehydrated, with multiple injuries. The emergency room physician who treated her described it as one of the most serious cases of neglect they had ever encountered. In 2011, Angela was convicted of the unimaginable crime of killing her 15-year-old daughter, Jeanette. She had suffered severe mistreatment, and the discovery of her lifeless body left a community in shock. Angela's guilty plea to aggravated murder led her to being sentenced to death, a decision that deeply affected everyone involved.
Says he hopes a new trial will end with McAnulty spending the rest of her life in prison.
Authorities rushed to the Eugene, Oregon home, but sadly, 15-year-old Jeanette was already gone. Medical examinations revealed that she had suffered from severe neglect and with clear signs of mistreatment. Investigators quickly focused on her mother, Angela, who was arrested and charged with aggravated murder. In 2011, Angela admitted to the crime, pleading guilty and accepting her punishment without a trial. Over the years, however, the case took unexpected turns. Angela's legal team argued that her original attorneys had not represented her well, and this led to a series of appeals. As time passed, Oregon's legal system changed. In 2019, new laws were passed that reduced the penalties for certain crimes, including child murders involving extreme harm. This change in legislation opened the door for a reconsideration of Angela's sentence. After years of legal battles and emotional struggles, a new agreement was reached. Instead of staying on death row, Angela was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the maximum sentence allowed under the new laws. As the verdict was read, she started crying.
Judge Pratt says her defense team was rushed and unprepared when they took up McNulty's case.
Though justice was served, the pain of Jeanette's tragic story remains a heartbreaking reminder of the horrors a child can face and the difficult journey families go through to find justice. Angela McAnulty, once the only woman on death row in the state, now faced a life sentence instead. Though she would never be released from prison, it did not erase the anguish of the crime she committed or the suffering it caused those who loved her daughter, Jeanette. Additionally, Angela's former husband, Richard McAnulty, was also involved in the tragic murder by mistreatment. He too was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. While this legal resolution brought a sense of justice, it couldn't undo the suffering Jeanette endured. In July 2021, Angela's sentence was re-examined, leading to a significant change. Her death sentence was cancelled, and she was resentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This was the harshest penalty allowed under a new Oregon law addressing cases of extreme mistreatment. With both the legal system and legislature taking action, her new sentence was finalized, ensuring she would spend the rest of her life in prison with no chance of release. This case leaves a sense of deep sadness and anger, not only because of the extreme cruelty suffered by Jeanette, but also because of the long and painful journey her family had to endure for justice. While Angela McAnulty's sentence was altered, it doesn't change the tragic reality of a child lost in such a devastating way. The emotional toll of this case will forever affect those who knew Jeanette and all who followed the details of her story. Up next, Reginald Lofton, a teenager whose actions turned a robbery into a brutal murder. What led to this deadly encounter, and how did the justice system respond?
Jury found the defendant in the second count, felony murder, guilty. We, the jury, found the defendant in the third count, felony murder, guilty.
On March 1st, 2016, 28-year-old Shane Varnador, hardworking and kind, did his usual night shift delivering pizzas for Papa John's, dreaming of designing video games. But that night, he never made it home. Authorities later uncovered that Shane was lured to an apartment complex in Gwinnett County, Georgia, by two teens, Reginald Lofton and Jermaine Young, who intended to rob him. Upon Shane's arrival, he was shot and killed. Police couldn't determine which of the teens pulled the trigger, but under Georgia law, aid in a crime resulting in death holds equal responsibility with the shooter. At 14, Lofton played a crucial role by providing the phone used for the fake order. After Shane was killed, Lofton took the pizza back to his apartment as if nothing had happened.
During the lick, the pizza man flinched on him and the gun went off and he shot him.
Yes. And I said, Reginald, did you hear that gunshot? He said, no, I had my headphones on.
Lofton was arrested and tried for Shane's murder. The courtroom was filled with emotion as the prosecution narrated how a man's life was taken over something as trivial as a pizza. Shane's family members shared their pain. His mother was too emotional to read her statement. His sister described how her young daughter didn't understand death, asking repeatedly when she would see her uncle again. The judge showed no sympathy for Lofton and before sentencing stated, "I wish I could give you more time than I can because I consider you a cold-blooded killer. I hope you never leave prison." But because of a recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling, minors convicted of murder couldn't be sentenced to life without parole. It was considered cruel and unusual punishment. Lofton was given life in prison with the possibility of parole. He would have to serve 30 years before becoming eligible, meaning he wouldn't even have a chance at release until he was 45 years old. As the verdict was read, tears streamed from the defendant's eyes.
Now, a teen that young, 14 at the time of the crime, to be sentenced to life without parole.
Before sentencing, Lofton's sister pleaded for clemency, saying, "Instead of throwing him under the jail cell, give him a second chance."
That my brother do deserve a second chance at life, instead of throwing him under the jail cell.
Lofton faced numerous struggles growing up. After losing his mother, his father was deemed unfit to care for him, leaving him under his sister's care. He had already encountered legal troubles and experienced too much violence for his young age. When it was his turn to speak, Lofton initially refused. However, before the judge made the final decision, he hesitantly said, "I just want to say I'm sorry for your loss, but I did not kill your son. I wasn't the shooter. That's it, Judge." Regardless of whether Lofton pulled the trigger, the fact remained. Shane Varnador was gone. A hardworking man, a loving son, and a devoted brother had lost his life over something senseless. His family was left with heartbreak that would never fully heal.
And I can't imagine what my life's going to be like. I'm sorry.
Lofton was given a second chance with parole in his sentence, yet Shane never had that opportunity. His family continues to grieve a life that could have been, all because of a single pizza delivery call that went terribly wrong. A young man lost his life over a pizza delivery. The next case shows how a trip to the mall turned into a nightmare when a petty argument spiraled into deadly violence.
I know and understand what I did was wrong, and I accept full responsibility for my actions.
I was saying I'm sorry, but saying I'm sorry is not only what I've done.
Just 2 days before Christmas in 2022, a time when families are engrossed in holiday preparations, a tragic event left one family forever altered. That evening, inside the Nordstrom store at the Mall of America, 19-year-old John Tay Hudson lost his life in an act of cruel violence. An argument erupted between two groups of young men within the mall, quickly escalating into deadly violence. During the fight, John Tay was tackled to the ground. At that moment, 19-year-old Tayshawn Adams Wright and his accomplice, Lavon Longstreet, drew firearms and shot John Tay multiple times at point-blank range. A woman shopping with her daughter also sustained injuries from a stray bullet, causing the mall to go into lockdown as shoppers fled in terror. Upon officers' arrival, John Tay was found with fatal gunshot wounds on the floor. Despite attempts to save him, he did not survive. Surveillance footage led investigators to identify the suspects. Following an intense manhunt, Adams Wright and Longstreet were arrested, each charged with second-degree murder and second-degree assault. Months passed until Adams Wright surprised everyone in court by openly admitting to killing John Tay. When questioned by his lawyer on the circumstances of the shooting, he responded, yes, but afterward expressed remorse for his actions.
I want to apologize for bringing pain and suffering to the victim family. Also, the lady got shot.
Subsequently, the judge sentenced Adams Wright to 30 years in prison. Longstreet's trial is still pending, though he faces a similar outcome.
My head around this. No one who hasn't gone through what you're going through can. It's 30 years and 7 months. No.
For John Tay's mother, Lynn, no sentence could ever bring her son back. She expressed her heartbreak, saying, his parents will still have him. They can visit him, write to him, talk to him, but my son is gone forever. Her sister also mentioned in an interview, everybody loves him. He was a people person. She described John Tay as a loving and vibrant young man whose life was stolen far too soon.
He was funny, sometimes quiet. Like, everybody loved him. He was a people person. Bullet wound or something. I didn't think that nothing too serious about it.
An innocent mall visit ended in tragedy, altering a family's destiny. The senseless act of violence taking John Tay's life inflicted a deep wound on his family and their surrounding community. Although seeking justice, John Tay's mother knows that no verdict will suffice in replacing her son. John Tay's murder was a brutal act of senseless violence. The next case shows how a young mind can commit a horrific act.
You are charged with 1 count of manslaughter. It is a second-degree felony. It is punishable by up to 15 years Florida State Prison. Do you understand that?
That's it.
On May 23, 2024, in Lauderdale Lakes, Florida, the shocking crime committed by 14-year-old Sofia Koval left a family and community reeling. After the beating death of her 79-year-old grandmother, Maria Koval, everyone struggled to comprehend how such horror emerged within a family. The day of Maria's tragic death, an emergency call led authorities to the Koval residence, where they discovered Maria unresponsive, with no hope of revival. Their investigation soon concluded that the perpetrator was her own granddaughter, Sofia. Family members struggled to understand how Sofia, once the bright and gentle girl of their family, could have done this. At just 14 years old, Sofia was taken into custody and placed in juvenile detention. At first, it seemed like her case would be handled in the juvenile system, but prosecutors soon had a different plan. On October 1st, prosecutors made a bold decision. Sofia would be charged as an adult with manslaughter. She was transferred from juvenile detention to the Broward County Jail and placed in protective custody. The courtroom was tense as a judge ruled that there was enough evidence to proceed with the case. Sofia prays that the decision will be in her favor, but the charge of manslaughter carries serious consequences.
14-year-old Sofia Koval openly prayed in court as she waited for her case to be called.
If convicted as an adult, Sofia could face up to 15 years in prison. There was also another complication. Sofia was not a U.S. citizen. If convicted, she could face deportation after serving her sentence. A Broward State Attorney, Harold F. Pryor, and a team of senior prosecutors carefully reviewed the case. However, because of her young age, there was a possibility that she could be sentenced under juvenile sanctions. In that case, she would serve a maximum of 3 years in detention and could be supervised until she turned 21.
On May 23, 2024, Sofia Koval did beat Yevgenia Koval about her head and body, resulting in multiple injuries, and during that beating episode.
After considering all the facts and evidence, they decided that the adult court was the right place for Sophia's trial. Because of the heinous nature of the crime, and after considering everything presented by the defense so far, I believe it is appropriate that this case should be handled in adult court, Pryor stated. While prosecutors wanted justice for Maria Koval, they also acknowledged that Sophia was still a child. They promised to work with her attorneys to find a resolution that balanced accountability with understanding her age and circumstances.
She is seen praying and crossing herself during that hearing. And her case was back in court today as the state is weighing whether to charge her as an adult.
The case left a family shattered. A grandmother lost her life, and a teenage girl now faced the consequences of a terrible act. The community struggled to understand how such violence could happen between loved ones. Judge Elizabeth Scherer also said it's a difficult decision.
Hold a 14-year-old in secure detention is very, very difficult under the law. Even when juveniles commit, first-degree felonies, robbery, kidnapping.
Sophia's case shows that even family ties can be broken by violence. However, the next case reveals a sinister plot that would take the life of a promising college student.
These are 14 and a 13-year-old boy. We should all remember that.
Family, including Tessa Major's father, silently left court.
On a cold evening in December 2019, Tessa Majors, an 18-year-old Barnard College freshman, strolled near Morningside Park, Manhattan, harboring dreams and ambition. With life and opportunity in her hands, the few minutes ahead would, unfortunately, see them extinguished. Shortly before 7 p.m. on December 11th, 3 teenagers came into the park with one intention: to rob someone. Past deeds lay behind, but tonight, everything would change. They observed Tessa engrossed in her phone, making her their target. As Rashawn Weaver seized her from behind, Luciano Lewis restrained her, searching her pockets. But Tessa wasn't going to give up easily. She fought back, even biting one of the attackers on the finger. That's when everything changed. Enraged, Weaver pulled out a knife and stabbed Tessa multiple times. One of the wounds pierced her heart. Even after being attacked, Tessa struggled to get away. She managed to climb up a flight of stairs near the park entrance, desperately trying to find help. At the top of the stairs, a security guard found her collapsed and bleeding. She was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. Tessa Majors was gone. The very next day, police arrested a 13-year-old boy who matched the description of one of the attackers. He was wearing clothes and sneakers similar to those seen in surveillance footage. During questioning, he confessed that he and his friends had planned the robbery, but claimed he wasn't the one who stabbed Tessa. As police continued their investigation, they struggled to find the other suspects. One of them, Rashawn Weaver, had gone into hiding, with family members reportedly helping him avoid arrest. It took 2 weeks before the police finally caught him.
The other 2 suspects will be tried in adult court. Their trials on murder and robbery charges are pending.
Once all 3 suspects were in custody, the full details of the crime came to light. Prosecutors revealed that the attack wasn't just a random robbery gone wrong. It was intentional, cruel, and premeditated. The youngest of the attackers, who was just 13 at the time, pleaded guilty to first-degree robbery. Because of his age, he was sentenced to only 18 months in a juvenile detention center.
Anything you want to say on behalf of your son? Weaver's mother had no comments about her son, turning her head away. Neither did Lewis's parents.
Luciano Lewis, who helped restrain Tessa, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and first-degree robbery. He was sentenced to 9 years to life in prison, yet he shows no remorse for his actions.
The student was stabbed to death, was sentenced today, 9 years to life in prison.
He was one of 3 middle school students.
The final suspect, Rashawn Weaver, the one who held the knife, admitted to stabbing Tessa. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 14 years to life in prison. The tragic murder of Tessa Majors shook the entire city. She was young, talented, and full of life. Her family and friends were devastated, left to grieve a life taken too soon. While her killers were caught and sentenced, no punishment could ever bring Tessa back. It was a heartbreaking reminder of how senseless violence can destroy lives. Tessa Majors' potential, curtailed by unforgiving fate, demanded her aspirations fall silent. Her profile symbolized stolen chance, submerged beneath malevolence, an unresolved tragedy, preserving undue loss. Tessa's case shows how teens had planned their crime from the very start. The next case shows how manipulation can lead to devastating consequences.
Did you hear something?
Yes, he was screaming bloody murder.
Okay.
And was he actually saying the words bloody murder, or are you just using that as a phrase?
I was just using that as a...
On a quiet night in 2014, the Sikorsky family in Plymouth Township, Michigan, faced a nightmare they could never have imagined. Their adopted daughter, 15-year-old Roxana Sikorsky, had been plotting something unthinkable, an attack on her family. Roxana wasn't acting alone. Her then-boyfriend, Michael Rivera, who was older than her, had been guiding her every move from outside the house. He sent her messages, giving her step-by-step instructions. That night, with a knife in hand, Roxana entered her 12-year-old brother's room and stabbed him. She then attempted to attack her younger sister before fleeing the house and running away with Rivera. Thankfully, her brother survived, and authorities quickly apprehended Roxana and Rivera. Upon investigation, it was discovered that Roxana and Rivera intended to kill her family and escape together. Investigations revealed that Rivera had been directing Sikorsky through text messages, providing explicit instructions and even anatomical diagrams to ensure the lethality of the attacks. As the case went to court, Roxana pleaded guilty to assault with intent to murder. The trial was heartbreaking for her family, particularly her adoptive mother, Laureen Sikorsky. Instead of anger, Laureen begged for mercy, believing Roxana had been manipulated by Rivera into making terrible choices.
Roxy was misled and used by an older adult. However, nothing will benefit this child by sending her to jail.
She said in court she will miss her high school prom, her graduation, her friends, and her family. She is in desperate need of continued psychological help.
Roxana is now 17 years old. She will miss her high school prom, her graduation, her friends, and her family. She is in desperate need of continued psychological help.
Roxana also spoke in court, expressing deep regret for her actions. She apologized to her family, saying she was sorry for not being the daughter they had hoped for, and promised to work on becoming a better person.
I would like to apologize to my family for not being the daughter they wished I would be. I promise that I will get better, no matter what happens.
Despite her mother's plea, the judge sentenced Roxana to 10 to 20 years in prison. She received credit for the 528 days she had already spent in custody and would undergo extensive psychiatric treatment while serving her time. Meanwhile, Michael Rivera, the man responsible for influencing Roxana's actions, was sentenced to life in prison for his role in the attack. The case left the Sikorsky family shattered. A mother lost the daughter she had adopted and loved, while two siblings had to recover from both psychological and emotional wounds. While Roxana's mother holds hope for her daughter's future, the scars of that night remain. These women killers shattered trust and turned homes into horror. Their cold denials in court reveal the depth of their cruelty. These aren't just crimes. They're stark reminders that danger often hides in plain sight.